been so critical and important to us pre-COVID, that is the tourism sector, to now be in a position to have more people have a chance to ply their trade. The taxi drivers, we have met with them over the last 3-4 weeks on a number of occasions at Cabinet, at the task force, to allow them to have bubble tours all around the island, independent operators. And so this is the sector, the last sector almost, where we need to open the economy. And so you're going to find independent taxis would have access or more opportunity to carry tourists around the island and to various sites, approved sites. And another area that has been very, very slow to come on, but we are happy to announce that people on the beaches, the hair braiders, those who do massages, aloe vera workers, and even, as we speak, the consideration of those who have the private vendors who take pictures with tourists and so on, will all now have an opportunity to be involved in the tourist trade as it has been, as it opens up in November and December. The Ministry of Tourism has done an excellent job of wooing back the ships to our lands, as you would have heard yesterday in the press conference by the Minister of Tourism. And so as we have more and more tourists landing, 71,000 in November, I think nearly over 100,000 in December, we need to have the opportunity to have these tourists be involved in the economy. And so it's good news, welcome news that we open up. We're not fully there yet. Let's be careful. We're not fully there yet. We are still very careful about protecting our people, or we must look at their lives. And I'm sure we'll hear from Dr. Laws shortly, but for us, we have been very concerned that the health system not be overwhelmed. People may get COVID. If you're vaccinated, you will not even know it sometimes. If you do get it, it will be mild forms. If you're vaccinated, you do not expect to get seriously ill or go to the hospital and, God forbid, even die. If you're unvaccinated, you're likely, if you contract it, to get seriously ill. So in St. Kitts and Nevis, our people have done better than our neighbors in being vaccinated. We have done an excellent job in having most of our people vaccinated, which now allows us to open the doors more fully to the economy. And we are almost there, but we have to be careful still. We still have the restriction of a curfew from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. And as we go forward and we become more confident, that can be considered to be removed. We still have 1 or 2 other restrictions that we have to ensure to maintain the safety of the people, but we are almost there. And so the question of fully opening up, we expect that as we go forward, tourism comes back on board, which is more or less the last sector, that will be almost there in terms of fully opening up. And it's good news for all of us, for the economy, and for all of us as we come back to that sense of normalcy. Thank you.
Thank you. Only to add one small point, that the more persons who become vaccinated, they make the case for the fuller opening powerful. So as more persons go out to get vaccinated, then it is easier for us, for there will be less concerns about the risk of serious infection. I want to invite Dr. Laws to come and to address the health matters that had been raised previously. And again, welcome back.
Thank you, PM, and good morning to everyone. My task is to respond to the health-related questions. The first question referred to Merck's COVID-19 antiviral pills. Now, Merck's antiviral pill is called molnupiravir. Now, this is the first antiviral medication for COVID-19 to date. Now, the antiviral pills, what they do is they target the COVID-19 virus. It disrupts the virus's ability to replicate and spread. Now, this medication, molnupiravir, it is given 4 tablets twice a day for 5 days, so it's a 5-day course. And when I looked at the literature, I saw a quote of approximately $700 for the 5-day course. So now that's the initial cost, but I'm sure once it's approved, let's be hopeful that the cost may be much more affordable. Now, during the trials, this medication was given to persons who were diagnosed with COVID and who were experiencing symptoms, and persons who had the potential of becoming more seriously ill, becoming hospitalized. And what they found is that this medication reduced the risk of hospitalization and deaths by about 50%. So this drug has potential. More work is being done on this drug. However, it's undergoing, or it's going through the approval process. And so it has to gain the approval of the World Health Organization's emergency use listing. So once the nod of approval comes from WHO, once the nod of approval comes from CARPHA's Caribbean regulatory system, the Ministry of Health, the Federation, will do all it can in terms of sourcing this medication. Now, this would be good if it's successful, because it would be yet another ammunition in our fight against COVID-19. The second question referred to Pfizer's vaccine for use in children 5 to 11 years. Now, on Tuesday, a smaller dose of Pfizer's BioNTech vaccine cleared its first hurdle for use in children 5 to 11 years. Now, this is a new indication, meaning it's being used in children as young as 5 to 11. So this also has to go through the full approval process. And again, once we get the nod of approval from the World Health Organization and CARPHA's Caribbean regulatory system, we will consider its use in our children in this age group. Now, until then, as a federation, we must continue our focus in terms of vaccinating our adults. To date, only 72.2% of our adults are fully vaccinated, and so we have the remainder of about 28% of our adults to come on board in terms of accepting this vaccine. And as you are aware, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine has been offered to children 11 to 17 years. And in terms of our coverage so far 11.8% of the children 12 to 17 have come on board in terms of receiving the first dose, and only 8.4% have come on board and are already fully vaccinated. So we have work to do in terms of the Ministry of Health collaborating with the Ministry of Education in terms of encouraging parents and guardians to bring their children forward and coming on board in terms of accepting this vaccine. Now, despite our successes, let me just pause. I think I said it yesterday. When you look at our vaccination rate, 51.3% of the total population is already fully vaccinated, and St. Kitts and Nevis is the first in this sub-region to have passed WHO's benchmark. So WHO says, look, all territories should aim to cover at least 40% of your population with COVID-19 vaccines. So we were the first in this sub-region to pass this benchmark. However, we cannot get too comfortable. We have to continue our work, because based on our local data, we still have work to do in terms of bringing on board the others who have not yet received the vaccine. When you look at the data in terms of the cases, if you are unvaccinated in the Federation, your risk of becoming or picking up COVID is increased. If you are unvaccinated, and if you are 60 years and over with comorbidities, your risk of picking up COVID is high. Your risk of getting severe COVID, being admitted, and even dying is increased. And so this is just a word out there to persons, the other 28% who have not yet come on board, 28% of our adults. We want you to empower yourselves with the information and come on board. We want to reach out to the media houses who are present to help us, to empower our people with respect to, providing parents, guardians, teachers, adults with the information in terms of coming on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I got a WhatsApp that Dr. Laws looked very relaxed, so she had a good vacation. We're happy about that. I think there was one area that the Attorney General did not address from the task force. The Minister of Entertainment had put a proposal to the task force with respect to facilitation of the entertainers. I don't know if there's any update of the task force work on that.
Thanks, Prime Minister, and I apologize for not having raised another area that many people are anxiously waiting when we say fully opening up the economy, and that has to do with our entertainment. I did mention that we still have a curfew in place from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m., which means that most functions have to be finished by midnight. And so we are hoping that we would have had a full discussion and recommendations to the Cabinet as to what we do going forward. These still have to be finalized. But we are hopeful that there will be shortly a slew of recommendations to allow events producers to be able to have functions. I should warn you that the predominance of the recommendations require those participants to be vaccinated, to be fully vaccinated. So we want you, whether you're going to put on a function, you're going to play at a function, you want to go to the function, make sure you get vaccinated. It's very important that we try to contain this virus that we have here and the task force recommendations. Because remember, the task force's mandate has been to see how we manage this response to the virus. And I think that I must commend the Prime Minister and the Cabinet for having put forward the concept of a national COVID task force last year when we passed the National COVID Prevention and Control Act 2020, number 16 of 2020. In it, there was an interministerial, interdepartmental committee, which we call the National Task Force, from a wide range of public departments. The top public servants in our country meet every week. They spend a lot of time debating, ensuring that everything we do in this country is viewed from a prism of keeping our people safe, but at the same time, allowing the country to function properly in terms of economics, in terms of public service. And so far, we believe that we have done a very good job. And we will continue to work as long as we are required to do so to ensure that. So the entertainers have come to the task force. There have been a widespread debate on this matter, and recommendations are to go before Cabinet shortly, where we hope we'll have more functions, where people can be more relaxed. We lose some restrictions, but again, I emphasize, we want to ensure that people who participate in person in these functions should be fully vaccinated. I should also point out that just this week, there's a very important and very comprehensive presentation made to the task force by the National Carnival Committee. The chair of that committee came and was very detailed in terms of the type of functions that we'd want to have. They've made a very powerful and strong case for us to start having calypso shows, tents shortly. They're restricted in terms of the numbers can be in person, again, fully vaccinated, but these will be streamed live. And so there are a lot of the functions that we'll be having over the next few weeks leading up to Carnival. Very important here, number 50. These, a lot of them would be virtual. We'll have limited numbers of in-person, fully vaccinated people as we are done with CPL, being allowed to go, and that we are still very concerned about street activities. And these are still, at this point in time, still on hold. We believe that we will restrict those street activities, but it is important to understand that we also want our entertainers, those people who ply their trade, to be given the opportunity to play on stage, to play in controlled environments, and the cabinet shortly will be making those types of determinations how far we can go. So I just thought I'd add that to the question of fully opening up. Thank you very much, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Attorney General, and I thank every member of the task force for their very important work and their commitment, both those working at the federal level and those at the level of the NIA. There was one question that still remains, and that is the question to do with the small man. I'm paraphrasing. How are they going to, or how will they benefit from the opening up of the tourism activity? For that, I want to call the Minister of Tourism to speak on that matter and to thank him and his team for the work that has led so far to the resumption in a very positive way of the cruise tourism here. Minister Grant, please.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'd like to apologize for my tardiness this morning. I had a medical emergency which I had to attend to. But I'll answer the question as paraphrased by the Prime Minister. And to say that the Team Unity government is a government that ensures that we make sure that in any decision that we make, the so-called small man is right front and center of the decision making. I should first of all say that we have done a tremendous amount of work to get where we are today. Over the last 18 months, while in the height of the pandemic, we trained in excess of 5,300 persons who are either directly or indirectly involved in the tourism industry. We made sure that every single person identified in those critical areas were trained in what was to come and what is our new norm. We trained taxi drivers, tour operators, Arab vendors, hair braiders, you name it, they were trained. And they were trained because we had a plan. And the plan was, we knew that at some point in time, the country would be opened up in a phased way and eventually opened up fully, as the Attorney General has said this morning. And where are we today? 16 months ago, we had no ships. As a matter of fact, a month ago, there were complaints in the country, quite understandably, that we were only getting one ship, the Seabourn Odyssey, which was over at Carambola, and that the small man wasn't able to benefit from that. We understand that. We appreciate that. we are empathetic towards that. But as my grandmother always said, one cocoa full basket. And so these are very critical times, and we take what we can get in the moment of time, expecting greater things to come. Yesterday, at the press conference that the Ministry of Tourism had in conjunction with the St. Kitts Tourism Association Authority, we said what was coming. We indicated that for the month of November, we are going to have 27 calls, bringing up somewhere in the region of 71,000 plus passengers into St. Kitts. We spoke about 51 calls for December, bringing 119,000 passengers here. We mentioned January, 32 calls, February, 31 calls, March, 31 calls. That's a significant cry from where we were 2 months ago. Obviously, it's not a position where we were in 2018, neither where we were in 2019. But I can tell you, it's much better than 2020. And I can also say that it augurs well for 2022 and beyond. And so where is the small man? And I think the cries really came, Prime Minister, from the taxi drivers, I believe. I would say in the system, and my CEO who is here can tell me if I'm wrong, we have in excess of 500 taxis, I think, on the books. As it is now, I think there are only maybe 100 plus who have been certified to ply their trade. Yes, we have always been concerned that it appears as though the bulk of persons who come may go to the scenic railway or go to cantors. But that is not entirely correct. Because pre-COVID, when you had cantors still there, and you had the scenic railway still there, and you had 500 taxi drivers in the system, there were days at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when you're looking for a taxi, there are none because all are occupied. Pre-COVID. And so pre-COVID, the microscope may not have been on cantors or scenic railway. I suspect, because the pie is very much smaller, the microscope is on them. But I can also tell you, if the numbers play out in November and the numbers play out in December and beyond, with the numbers of taxi drivers who are now certified, we may still very well have an issue in terms of availability of taxis on any given day when we have 2 ships and 3 ships. And I must say that on November the 16th, we have 3 ships. On 4 or 5 other days, we have 2 ships. So really and truly, there is going to be ample business out there for the taxi drivers. However, I should say to you that the cabinet has just approved or just made a decision which will inure to the benefit of the taxi drivers. Because what has happened was that the independent persons, taxi drivers included, were not able to ply their trade in this critical period of the pandemic, only at set times. So when the ship came in, they would only have been able to ply their trade at 10 in the morning and at 1 in the afternoon. We have changed that as of yesterday, I think it was, so that they can get business any time of the day. And we did that because we felt that we needed to make a greater inclusion of the taxi drivers and the tour operators in this critical time. And so this is a very fluid situation. And so as issues arise, we deal with them, making sure that decisions that we make benefit the so-called small man. And I must say, for November and December, I think they may not be overly happy, but I think they will be happy for what we have produced. My team, we have gone very far beyond the call of duty to make sure that we go in front of the cruise lines, front and center, and ensure that St. Kitts and Nevis get what we deserve. And I must say, we are still working hard to make sure that even though we have 27 in November and 51 in December, we might very well have many more than that, bearing out some more work that we need to do. So I want to say to those taxi drivers and tour operators, we understand the challenges at the moment, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. I would hope that the task force, in viewing all that is before them, come December 31st, 2021, or before that, we can take down the fence at Port Zante and get back to some greater state of normalcy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Grant, and we give assurance again that the government is working hard and in a committed way to ensure that the stronger, safer future is being delivered to all. Indeed, at this point of the small man, we address it frontally in a meeting with the Chamber of Industry and associated business entities in a cabinet meeting, including Cantos, Delil Waldwin, etc., etc. And we expressed concern that we wanted more of the small men and women to be able to participate as we open up the tourism industry. We spoke, for example, to the notion of shared sacrifice, shared in the gains also. So persons who are suffering now, they couldn't get jobs. Whatever little that is coming, we wanted the widest number of persons to have some of it. It is that discussion and that determination by the cabinet that led us to insist almost that we have the cruise going back down to Port Zante so that other actors could benefit, those with their stores there who had been vaccinated and others. And we see as a result of that, more persons, as the Minister of Tourism has just said, will be able to benefit. And as the pie gets larger, it's always challenging when the pie is small. But even when the pie is small, we have to ensure that there are cardinal principles that help us to ensure that everyone can keep their head above water in a time of little. That is why we intervene, for example, with our stimulus package, so that everyone, it's not perfect, it's not your full salary, but at least it helps you to maintain some modicum of dignity, of self-respect. It allows you to be able to buy your own bread, to take care of your children, pay your rent. So those things really are deep on my heart and my mind, and by extension, the cabinet. I want to invite Minister Phipps to give a view in relation to the supply chain, and then there was a question asked about CXC results, which the Minister of Education would address. The Comptroller of Customs is here, and the Commissioner of Police, I don't know if they would want to say something on any of the matters posed, but I did indicate that you all were here before, you all are still here, so the question remains. So Senator Phipps, and then we will have Minister Powell, and then we will have Mr. Brandy, and we will have the Comptroller of Customs, Mr. Butler. Thanks.
Okay. Good afternoon, well, it's almost afternoon. I am here to try to attempt to give an answer to Mr. LaShawn Dixon for his question which I wish to paraphrase, and the question was, in light of the fact that there is a manifestation of global supply chain problems, the media, I guess, and the public, whom he represents, is trying to find out what is the government's response to that, how do we feel about supply chain issues, and what can be done. The Prime Minister began answering the question on the very right track, indicating that it's a global issue, which means that it is beyond the reach of this government or any government that makes up any of the member states globally to attack on its own. The supply chain issue would have been a direct result of the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result of economic shutdowns that would have been seen across the world in major producing countries, the chief one, of course, being China. What has essentially happened is that as COVID-19 cases rose globally, factories would have been closed. As a result of that, you had other issues with logistics and transport, such as loading and offloading of containers, etc. What normally happens in an environment where COVID and other factors are not germane to impact upon the supply chain, which for the most part is linear, meaning that it runs in a line from the time you get your raw materials together to the production, to actual processing of goods for export, transportation, distribution, to the point when it comes in your cart, if it's e-commerce, or in your shopping cart if you're going to the grocery, or any places that sell consumer goods to purchase. So what normally happens in the case, for example, of China, is that companies like Rams, SL Horsford, etc., even stores that sell consumer goods like Best for Less, Coats, etc., may have to begin ordering something like 9 to 12 months in advance. That is the reality of the situation. What would normally happen with a shipping container from China is that it would take about 40 days from the time that shipment leaves a particular port in China and again gets perhaps to the US or gets down into perhaps the Panama Canal, where adjustments and rerouting and logistics with regards to shipping will get the goods to the countries that they're destined for. What is happening as a result of the supply chain issue is that what was taking 40 days to come from China is now taking like 75 days. By extension, we at the same time are recognizing that there are production shortfalls when it comes to fuel, especially petroleum production, etc. And that is a big factor when it comes to transportation, because let us not forget that when the goods land here, what you pay in terms of duty is based on the cost of the good, the insurance that is covering the shipment of the goods, and the cost of freight. And freight is driven to a large extent by the cost of fuel, the oil that you need to power a tanker, to get it from China into the US, etc. In the news recently, we have seen the pileup of ships with containers over on the western side of the United States. These are the goods coming from China. And again, a lot of it has to do with COVID cases that are high, labor shortages that result as a matter of course because of infections, deaths, etc., people being in quarantine. What is the answer to that? There are no short-term answers in terms of addressing a supply chain problem. Yes, we have a linear system, which is an old and antiquated system globally when it comes to getting goods to market. What we really need is a more dynamic, network-driven system where instead of you having to wait 9 months, 12 months to get a container ordered, then get it to where you want it, is to perhaps look at other alternatives. For example, a network that could be set up where you have what is called an export processing zone. So for example, China could have an export processing zone in Miami. They probably could have one somewhere else, perhaps maybe in Puerto Rico, so that when you need to get goods, instead of you going straight there, you can get it from the intermediary. What does it also mean for us in terms of supply chain? It means that we have to cut down our reliance globally on one country, China, which is supplying the rest of the world. It also means that we have to look at better relationships within the multilateral trading system with which to do business. What do I mean by that? For example, Brazil, the largest South American market. To be fair, the previous government and our government would have since 2005 been looking at the implementation of a partial scope agreement with Brazil, St. Kitts Nevis, as well as Guyana. What does that mean? It means that because Brazil is a large South American market, which has a multiplicity of goods and services with which to trade with the rest of the world, we can leverage our proximity to Brazil, leverage the relationship and proximity that Guyana has with Brazil, so that when goods leave Brazil, they go over a land, leave Brazil, correct, they go over a land route into Guyana, and once it gets into Guyana, it gets national treatment because you then have the environment of the CARICOM single market and economy. That's a simplified example of what I mean in terms of ending reliance on one particular country. Besides that, there's also opportunity within the whole ambit of looking at the supply chain readjustments that would take longer term initiatives to bring to fruition, and that is the use of artificial intelligence, for example, robotics, the use of digital technology so you can do tracking and logistics in a better way. But it has to be a balanced adjustment, because what you don't want is to deal with labor shortages by bringing in artificial intelligence, such as robots, to do the work that other human beings should be doing when those same human beings need to get work. So it's a delicate balancing act that we will have to follow. What are we prepared to do here locally? It is our intention in the Ministry of Trade within the next couple of weeks to bring in all of the importers to the table, to have a frank discussion with them. Customs will have to be present, Ministry of Finance will have to be present, the interest in shipping will also have to be present, because what we are realizing then is that basically, if I recall the data correctly, take a country like Bahamas, it would have cost them before the supply chain issues to maybe spend about $5,000 in terms of freight to get a container from China into the Bahamas. That same container right now costs $25,000 US in freight. So that's a knock-on effect, major knock-on effect. Businesses are not in business for their health, so it means if they bring in goods, they're going to pass down the cost of bringing in the goods to the consumer. And that's where government comes in. So that is the reason why we're looking forward to having these consultations with the private sector, the other interests in shipping, etc., so that we can do whatever is within our power to bring some relief to our people. In the meantime, it also tells us that our own economic restructuring strategy for St. Kitts and Nevis has to happen, and has to happen faster. The Prime Minister began touching on it in terms of us being in a position where we do not take our food security for granted. We are fortunate that after the closure of the sugar industry in 2005, we ended up with large tracts of arable land, which is something that a lot of other jurisdictions within CARICOM cannot boast about. It then means that we need to produce more of what we eat, and the surplus should be ready for export. And that is what we need to spend some time and energy in, as well as the manufacturing that goes into that as well, in terms of agro-processing, etc., so that we can bring more goods to market, create more jobs locally, improve our balance of payments so that we cut down more on what we import and we big up more of what we want to export. So that would be my short answer to it in the meantime, Pierre.
Thank you. We want now to invite Minister Powell to address the question that was posed.
Good morning, all. In relation to the question on CXC results and when the Ministry of Education will give a formal report on those results, I can say that just about 2 weeks ago, CXC would have released results to very anxious parents and students across the Caribbean. To date, St. Kitts and Nevis has received only preliminary results from CXC. That meaning that there are still some results outstanding. So for example, we would have only received EPPDM results for the Charlestown Secondary School. And so there are a number of results that we are still yet to receive. We anticipate getting a full revised result sheet from CXC very shortly. Just this week we would have had discussions as to when we can schedule that formal reporting to the country on the results coming out of CXC. And to ensure that all students would have received results for the exams written. So I believe in the very short future we'll be in a position to come back and give that full report. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Mr. Bandy available?
A pleasant good morning to everyone. Mr. Prime Minister, concerning the question that was proposed to you concerning the investigation involving Hush Puppy, I am pleased to say this investigation continue with United States and our local police officers. At present, we are seeking MLAP to seek additional information from the United States, so thus we have engaged our Director of Public Prosecution to make the request on our behalf. So the matter is still investigating, still ongoing. Concerning the investigation that's taking place at Customs, yes, a report was filed by the Controller of Customs to the police. The police are carrying out investigation. Several statements have been recorded already, and presently our financial investigators are looking at the records to see if there are any charges that can be brought against those persons. Okay.
Thank you very much. Is there any more questions? We're about to wrap up.
Mr. PM, good afternoon. German Abel, SKN Vibes. I just have two questions. One, going back to your opening statement, you mentioned just about $320 million thereabout with regards to assistance to Nevis in various forms. Could you say whether or not those budgetary allocations or support came from the CBI program, and can you give the total, the period in which the amount encapsulates the total revenue for that period and how much of that revenue was allocated to SYNCITs? Second question has to do health related. Can we get from either the minister or Dr. Laws COVID-19 and children? How many children were affected? How many are still recovering from COVID? And in terms of the overall outlook for children and how COVID-19 and the lockdowns and all of this cloud has affected children.
Thank you very much.
Prime Minister, as head of government and leader of the Team Unity administration, the leader of the opposition recently announced that he will not be putting himself forward to lead the Labour Party. How do you welcome this announcement?
Mr. Prime Minister, a short while ago you indicated that the relationship between SYNCITs and Nevis has been better than it has ever been before. And I believe
repeat that first part.
The relationship between SYNCITs and Nevis has been outstanding under the Team Unity administration. The Premier of Nevis has also indicated that that is the case. But he has also mentioned that the revenues from the CBI program are still not being shared appropriately, that Nevis should be getting a much larger share. Wouldn't it be better if there is some kind of formula that can be put in place that standardizes the whole process of financial assistance or financial inputs to St. and inputs to Nevis, that it is based on some kind of perhaps population size or some such thing, instead of it being a case where it depends on which party is in government at the time. For example, if should Team Unity be out of office and some other party comes into play, that relationship could then change completely. So is there some kind of formula that can be put in place to standardize this whole relationship? Secondly, in regards to agriculture or aquaculture specifically, pre-COVID-19, I believe there was some interest to pursue a course of aquaculture in St. Kitts and Nevis. But I don't know what has happened to that particular program. Could there be some kind of update? And secondly, is it still a viable pursuit for the Federation?
Shani Carvey again from ZIZ Broadcasting Corporation. With increased tension in Taiwan from China, are there contingencies being put in place to facilitate repatriation of our citizens if necessary, and what are they? Thank you.
Devon Cornelius, WinFM. Construction works are expected to commence next week on the cruise piers. My question is, who are the contractors or contractor and project manager? How much will it cost? And who will foot the bill? And what role will the initial contractors play in the additional costs? Thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister, if I may be allowed to ask questions on behalf of persons not present here today. We have a question asking if the filming in St. Kitts competes with filming in Nevis. We also have questions, and we are facilitating our colleagues from Vaughan Radio in Nevis. They have two questions they've sent in. The first one, do arriving passengers receive their COVID-19 test results during the 24-hour quarantine period or after? And if after, given the recent backlog, will any changes be made to allow passengers to be released once 24 hours have passed and avoid long wait times? The second question, given the reduction in COVID-19 positive case numbers, will the government consider removing the 24-hour quarantine requirement for incoming vaccinated persons and instead use a test upon arrival and release when negative method? In relation to that, they have also asked, when can we expect a lifting of the state of emergency? We also have two questions from Freedom FM who were not able to be present today. This question, they have two questions. We are happy to learn that the National COVID-19 Task Force has approved additional tours in an effort to boost the experience provided to cruise guests. However, local commercial airline pilots based on Nevis are still calling on the government and the National COVID-19 Task Force to formulate specific protocols that would allow them to get back to work. These pilots have provided the Ministry of Civil Aviation and the task force with a proposal which documents clear safety protocols, but have yet to receive a response. With the Christmas season quickly approaching, with many planning to travel to and from the Federation, when will the task force meet and or communicate with the pilots, and can we get a timeline as to operations, when operations are expected to resume? The second question, we have received reports that nurses at the JNF General Hospital are owed overtime payments for the months of August, September, and October. Our nation's nurses are integral to the fight against COVID-19. So can you provide any information as to when this situation will be rectified?
Thank you very much for those final set of questions. You will have to give us some reminder, because there were quite many. The first one, though, with respect to the announcement that the leader of the opposition will step down as leader of the party, really, I haven't given it much thought. And therefore, I wouldn't reflect on it. Truth is, we are still working our way through a pandemic. And I am entirely and exclusively focused on taking St. Kitts and Nevis safely through the pandemic. And though I'm conscious of the politics of things around me, I do not want to lose focus on doing the people's job. And so I think that matter will play itself out, and we will see what happens when it happens. But my focus and my thoughts are so overwhelmed with doing the best that we can do. You hear all the various issues of a governmental nature. I don't have the luxury of time yet to contemplate much on that item. But Sarah, and we will see what will happen there. You mentioned, Mr. Bart, the issue of the sharing and basically whether there could be a measure that would standardize the sharing of revenues. And I think you hit onto something very powerful, because in the Constitution, the highest law of the land, there is a clause 110, which prescribes the formula for revenue sharing between St. Kitts and Nevis. So the highest law of the land outline how that should work, the lumping of the revenues, the subtraction of the costs, and the various arithmetic and perhaps division and subtraction that will become necessary in determining what element of revenues the federal government would transfer. There's an SRO created which was intended to give life to clause 1110. And 1110 lived a very short life. 110, yes. 110. What did I say? 1110? 110. Section 110 of the Constitution outlined that in very clear way. We departed from that way back, I think, in the 80s. It didn't work for a long period. And perhaps we will need to get further examination of what was wrong with 1110. 110, why am I adding to it? Clearly I'm not subtracting. But clause 110, I like that. So clause 110 clearly defines a precise mechanism. There's an SRO, to my recollection, that again helps you to operationalize 1110. 110. So that is a matter really that some work has to again be looked into. Why 1110? 110 was not implemented in the way it was intended. Because if we had that, really we wouldn't have this discussion. If the constitutional provision was observed way back in the 80s, because our Constitution came into being in 1983. If that was allowed or was given life, the discussion over revenues would not detain us. But 1110 in its wisdom, 110, clause 110, in its wisdom said that the focus in the parading of the revenue could not only be on revenues, that you have to take into account the expenses. Because we know, in order to get revenues, you have to incur expenses. So you have sales in the accounting terminology, and you have the cost of sales. I believe that there is something wise about 110 of the Constitution that we perhaps have again to reflect upon. We did not, however, arrive at the revenue sharing measure in any whimsical way. The truth be told, the Premier of Nevis and Senior Minister had made approaches, had made certain recommendations to the federal government regarding what was at the time considered to be a reasonable allocation. It is true at that particular moment the program was under pressure, and so the context is important. When the Premier exited the NIA, we had also overtures by the new Premier, Mark Brantley, and we made a proposal to what he had supplied to us. And that was basically it being the working formula. So it's not really a Timothy formula. It is of an arrangement, as it were, that we had come to at a particular moments in time. Is there a reason to revisit it? We had proposed then, and the financial secretary is here. I believe she had drafted a letter for us to engage independent international organization to come and to assist us in looking at this matter. Because perhaps, in a sense, you could say, either of us had a vested interest, perhaps, in a certain way, so bring in an independent person to look at that matter. Again, based on certain discussions, that matter was not expedited. But we are committed. We are committed to doing what is right and doing what is reasonable for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. We are committed for both islands of the Federation doing well. And if we were not so committed, we could not speak to almost $400 million in 6+ years being made available to various agencies of the federal government. So we have come from a significant past of nothing happening there or nothing of worth to where we can count close to $400 million. I think that is an incredible achievement. That, of course, does not deny that we must always have ongoing conversations, properly structured and in a proper arena. And these matters, of course, have to go through technical analysis, and then the politicians, if you will, the cabinets of the country, look at them and come to some reasonable conclusion about them. Of course, the public would know, but I am not one to engage the public in matters which really are to be being discussed in the cabinet, which are matters which require full technical work to ensure that we do it right. And so at the appropriate time when we get there, the public will have an indication what we had arrived at. But always our commitment is and will be, and I pledge my own personal commitment to ensuring that we have good arrangements which satisfy both entities within the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. That assurance I can give. And I am happy for what we achieve. And yes, I believe that we must continue to look at ways of improving everything that we do, including our financial arrangements. Mr. Bard put the interesting idea that we having come so far from nothing for the people of Nevis by the federal entity. And in fact, worse yet, there was a time when the federal entity used its majority to deny the honoring of checks at National Bank. That was at that time, I think Lincoln Maynard was the chairman for the NIA. So we have come from that to where near now of the bank to now where we are going to close to 400 million, 300 plus million dollars. That's a lot of money in any language. We accept that, and all the leaders have said it is the best arrangement. I wouldn't deny that there is need for improvement, and we must work on it. And we will, and we are committed. And I did indicate that we had set up a process to get us there. But important as that question was also the assumption made by Mr. Bart that it is likely, if there is not a team unity construct, that all this success story that we have had federally working with the NIA, that could vanish. And he says to me that Mr. Bart may have a good point to canvass, that there's a strong reason for the maintenance of team unity. Hidden between all that he has said quite a lot. But the most powerful point is him and for the country is that we must preserve unity so more good things can happen for the people and on the island of Nevis, and more good things can happen on the island of St. Kitts and for the people of St. Kitts. And so all of us have a vested interest to work with unity and create a unity construct of which all of us can be proud. So thank you, Mr. Bart, for asking that question. It was one of the more enlightening one, provocative, but a very good question that you had put, which has consequences for the future of the country and who will be best to preserve the country on the path to the stronger and safer future. The matter of aquaculture program and all those issues are important ones, and I would invite the PS of Agriculture to come to deal with it. Very quickly on the question of repatriating our citizens from Taiwan, I think at this point in time there is no need for unease. What we are seeing across the Taiwan Straits, these are not unusual, and they are being observed. And I do not think, well, at least in the near future, that we are going to have worsening of the relationship between across the strait so that there is a need for evacuation of our students. I want our students there, and I think 17 of them recently went there to focus on their studies, and they are going to be safe studying there. They've gone there to learn. I want them to learn quickly and learn well so that they can come back and make a contribution to our national development. Mr. Bishop Collins will speak in the matter.
Mr. Prime Minister, good afternoon. In relation to the question on the aquaculture, advanced technologies coupled with the environmental plus that we have and issues of food safety and food supply makes aquaculture a really viable option for us. And it is something that we are pursuing as part of the reform and advancement agenda for agriculture. Currently, we have some 4 farms that are doing subsistence agriculture, but we would have named some recently on one of the Prime Minister's leadership matters that we have some 14 projects that we are being supported with outside of our budget, our work program by allied institutions, and part of it is the Amexid program, which is a 2-part support, and one seeks to provide support to our farmers and to our federation in the area of advancement in the aquaculture activities here. We do have that dedication and have made provision in the Department of Marine Resources for it, and part of the project is also building the capacity in the Department of Marine Resources to support farms that are doing aquaculture. So it is part of the entire process of advancing agriculture and fisheries, and very much important for us. You'll be hearing much more about this as we continue to roll out.
Thank you very much. Then one other question had to do with filming. That's what what is taking place here now competes. I would use a different verb. I would say it complements what is happening in Nevis. Let's face it, we are advised that the Nevis Island Administration has a contractual arrangement with MSR, and that should deliver a certain number of films. MSR can go anywhere else to do the other films that it needs to have done. We all should be happy that it has chosen to stay in the Federation. In fact, the reality of the mutuality of the benefit was demonstrated to me Saturday. Because while I was at Kitchener Hill with Minister Grant and Minister Powell and Minister Nesbitt, the gentleman who was taking the photos and doing whatever else online, I was talking to him, and then I recognized that his accent was local. So I asked, "Who are you?" He said, "But you know my mother. My mother is Imelda Wilkin. I am her son." I said, "Oh, I know her from talking to her because she deals with the charters, etc., etc." But he has now been elevated in the structure of MSR, and so he is not localized to Nevis. He will go wherever they need him in the Federation. So more filmmaking here by any entity, whether on Nevis or on St. Kitts, benefits all of us. When they are in Nevis, they come down and they savor whatever they would want on St. Kitts, and similarly, when they are in St. Kitts, they will do the same. So we shouldn't see it as competition. Rather, we are having a complementary effort that enhances the status of filmmaking in the country, which will benefit all of us. By way of rough analogy, should we say if the cruise vessel goes to Nevis, it denies St. Kitts something? No. One federation, one people. And so all of us are benefiting when there's a positive activity happening on either island. When the Bank of Nevis comes to St. Kitts, that is good, because we are then indicating national ownership over an important sector, albeit the financial sector, and that the Federation as a whole is large, rich people, full of potential, able to take over foreign banks. Never is there competition that will hurt either by these developments. So we should allow our citizens, as it were, to ply their trade in either or in both or in any of the islands, and there is no need for disagreeable comments in relation to either development. One federation, and we are complementing each other. I'm sure I certainly wouldn't prefer them to have gone to Barbados or Dominica Republic. They stay here, and that is important. The Minister of Entertainment is here, and she will speak somewhat and briefly on the entertainment sector and what is happening there. I want, however, to invite Dr. Laws to deal with the matter of the arriving passengers getting their results in 24 hours, the matter of the pilots and the task force. Senator Phipps will deal with that, and the matter of the overtime payments, the Minister or Dr. Laws, someone from the health, would be able to deal with that. I will just make a general statement with respect to overtime. Overtime has to be properly verified, and overtime has to be controlled. Not just in this particular case, I'm making a general statement that applies across the government. And everybody who is due overtime will be paid. What is certain is their normal and regular salary is paid without let on the specified dates. But the information does not reach and does not go through the complete process of verification from the line ministry to the personal department, and then again at audit, then no payment will be made. But one thing you know with the government, the government will pay its debt. So there is no need for anxiety with respect to overtime. We wish it could have been instantaneous, but that is not the lived reality. So I would advise those who are doing their work on it to do it as expeditiously as they can. But no one will be unfeared in relation to overtime because the laws are clear with respect to that. And that is just a general statement regarding the matter of overtime, which we address at this very session of our budget estimates, how overtime is computed, etc., because there are some misconceptions regarding it. And so those matters, again, the personnel department, the audit department, the accountant general department, all these departments which have to do their vetting will do their vetting with respect to these matters. Let me on that note invite the Minister of Health and Entertainment et al., and then Dr. Laws will come, and then we will have Senator Phipps, and I think that will take care of all the questions, unless Ms. Bryan reminds us of any that we have omitted to address. Minister Nesbitt.
Thank you, PM. And yes, I'll start with the overtime. As the PM indicated, overtime is a process, and we have already submitted overtimes for the month of August through to October, but just let me, for clarity purposes, during that period, as you know, we were in the height of our COVID-19 and number of persons who were affected by COVID-19. The Ministry of Health was also affected, and a number of our nurses ended up having to double up and do extra shift. As a result, once we submitted the overtime during that period, it was way in excess of what finance would normally see from the ministry. And so there have been some back and forth to make sure we verify and validate all of our overtime so that the Ministry of Finance and the auditors are comfortable that what we would have submitted actually aligns with what the output should have been for that period. And so I'm happy to report that that has already been addressed, and we should be seeing shortly those individuals being able to be paid for the times that they would have worked overtime. So as the Prime Minister said, it is a process. We can't just pay. There must be some verification, and of course, finance, doing their due diligence, will ensure that whatever is submitted, they have asked all the relevant questions so that when it's time to audit, they are clear with the answers for any of the questions that may be raised regarding. I know there was also a question asked about the age group for persons who would have been positive with COVID-19 in terms of our under 18-year-olds. So what we can say is that for persons under 18, we would have seen 689 persons under the age of 18 would have been affected with COVID-19. That would have been around 25.9% of the total number of positive cases. And the CMO would correct me if I'm wrong, but from following the case managers and their data that they have been sharing, many of these individuals under 18, especially the much younger ones, fortunately for us at this time in this wave, they seem to have been able to bounce back very easily from the COVID-19. So we weren't seeing too much severe illness. Some were mostly asymptomatic, and if they did have any symptoms, it was very mild symptoms that these young persons were able to deal with. And so we were grateful for that, but I want to reiterate that is during this time, with this current wave, we know the variant that we were dealing with specifically would have been the Lambda variant. And so there's a possibility that that variant as well did not impact them as it did. We don't know what can happen in another wave, and that's why we are continuing to encourage persons to be vaccinated. We were fortunate in this wave that we did not see as many severe disease. Again, that's the variant that we had, but we do not know what can happen with another wave. We do not know what can happen with other variants, and so we want to continue to encourage persons to be vaccinated, because what we can say as well is that persons who were vaccinated showed no symptoms or very mild symptoms. And so we're encouraging persons, please, please, please be vaccinated. In terms of entertainment and the film that will be done here on St. Kitts by MSR Media, most of you would have been to learn about the press conference that we would have had at Kittishan Hill. And as the Prime Minister said, it's complementary. In all of our discussions with MSR Media, we made it absolutely clear that our Ministry of Entertainment is a federal ministry, and so the expectation is that whatever we do would be of benefit to both islands, because we are federal in nature. And so, just as the Prime Minister would have indicated, individuals who would have been working with them and on movies on Nevis are also coming over to St. Kitts and working with them here. And so it is not a matter of stealing anything. What we are providing as a federation is more locations and opportunities for them to be able to shoot various movies that they need to be able to. We understand, as the Prime Minister said, that they were considering other countries to be able to do some of the movies that they had in mind. So being able to come to both islands, having started in Nevis and having St. Kitts being able to open up so that they can also use locations here is complementary. It keeps them in the Federation. And as the Prime Minister also indicated, the NIA have a 3-movie contract with them, which they will continue to pursue and ensure that those movies are done on Nevis solely. And so what we are doing is just trying to make sure that at a federal level, we are able to structure our film industry in a way that would be of benefit to both St. Kitts and Nevis, and to make sure that now that we are pivoting to this type of industry, we have a company that's now here locally, instead of allowing it to go to a point where this industry goes beyond where we are able to control. We want to make sure federally we create the structures, policies, regulations that would be able to regulate the industry and ensure that it is of benefit to the people of both St. Kitts and Nevis. Tomorrow we should be having, from the Ministry of Entertainment, we will be having another in our series of events with our creatives to continue to open up to them, discuss with them what are the plans for the ministry, get their feedback. So that will be happening tomorrow. So I'm sure persons will be able to hear more about the ministry once we have completed that, which is the second within our series. And so we are hopeful that we would have persons from within the creative industry at that event tomorrow, so that they can hear from us what the vision, mission, and plans are of the ministry, and that they too will be able to provide their own feedback on the direction in which they believe that we would be able to go as a country. CMO.
Thank you very much. Dr. Laws is ready, and then Senator Phipps is ready.
All right, so I concur with my Minister of Health in what she shared with respect to the children and how many were impacted by COVID-19. And yes, the Lambda variant is in circulation, and our children have fared well so far. Just mild symptoms, no symptoms, and they've recovered properly. Now, there was a second part to this question. I think you asked the impact of COVID-19 and the lockdown on children. And I reflected on this, and I'm thinking that the COVID-19 pandemic have impacted our children significantly. By the very nature, our human beings, we are social beings, more so our children, because children play, they hug, they kiss, they interact closely with one another. And this is alien to the COVID-19 prevention and control measures, whereby you are asked to distance yourself and stay 6 feet apart from each other. And so COVID-19 is impacting the social development of our children. The last year, schools were closed for a few months, and so the teachers engaged children through the virtual platforms, and I'm sure the teachers had difficulty keeping up with all the children on the various platforms, and we may have lost some children academically, and so we won't even know the full impact of COVID-19 on our children. It may take us another 10, 15 years to see the true and full impact of this pandemic on our children. And if we were to even think deeper, there are hidden impacts. For example, in the lockdown, parents may not be earning as they used to, so this reduced income in the household, has an impact on our children in terms of nutrition, etc. And so the impact of COVID-19 on our children is significant. In terms of the arriving passengers, so the fully vaccinated inbound national is entitled to qualifies for a 24-hour quarantine. And so you receive your COVID-19 swab and test within the 24-hour period, and you are released, officially released from quarantine in that period. So what's happening on the ground? So if you land and you go to Royal St. Kitts Hotel, Four Seasons, or Park Hyatt, Marriott Hotel, your swab is taken maybe when you reach the hotel. So within a few hours of landing, your swab is taken, and well within the 24 hours, persons are officially released from quarantine. So for example, I returned to the Federation last Wednesday afternoon. My swab was taken by 7 a.m. Thursday morning. By 1 p.m. Thursday, I was out of quarantine. And so the backlog that we experienced a few weeks ago has been cleared. And so we have 4 labs in operation. We have the JNF General Hospital Lab, NextGen, Avalon, and QDL. And so results are received in a timely manner, and majority of the inbound packs are released within that 24-hour period. And so I think another question spoke to, will we continue testing within the 24 hours or test on arrival? So what I want to say is that we are almost there in terms of testing on arrival, because when you go to Marriott Vacation Club, Park Hyatt, your swab is taken just a few hours after landing, and your results is had in a very timely manner. Now, if we were to say test on arrival at the airport, that's going to require human resource at the airport and infrastructural changes at the airport to actually have hundreds of swabs being taken as a flight lands. And so we will continue tweaking our protocols as we go along, but just to highlight what would be required for us to process a full American Airlines or British Airways flight and test everyone on arrival, just to share with you, some of the things that would have to be put in place for us to achieve that. Thank you.
I want to thank Jackie Bryan for bringing that question on behalf of Freedom FM, if I recall correctly. And to put in context what was relayed by Ms. Bryan, she indicated that the sender from Freedom FM would have acknowledged and I dare say commended the fact that the government has now made possible the ability for more tours and tour operators to ply their trade. However, the point was being raised about local pilots wanting to get back to work. But before I come to that, I just wanted to reinforce one point. The Prime Minister would have spent quite a bit of time dealing with this in his opening presentation this morning, and in terms of explaining to us that the ability to recover and to work and to live with a pandemic has to be a measured approach. And where we are now is certainly not where we were 12 months ago. We have a number of tours that would have been approved. Practically, we are at the point where the ATV tours, the Alarub vendors, your primate handlers, etc., hair braiders, they are now being able to come out in a safe environment and do what they do best, which is to earn a living from the spoils of the tourism and allied services sectors. By extension, other tours have been already in place: Brimstone Hill, Caribou Boutique, the panoramic tour that includes photos at the top of Timothy Hill and so forth, as well as the Black Rocks engagements and so forth. So hello? And the safaris, thank you PM for reminding me of that, because that has recently been approved by Cabinet. However, so I just wanted to reinforce that it's taking place in a measured manner, because at the same time we recognize we want to live with COVID, but we want to do so in a safe environment for our people and for the visitors who come to our shows. On the issue of the pilots, I would have checked with the chairperson of the COVID-19 task force, Mr. Abdias Samuel, and he has confirmed that there is no recent proposal from local pilots before the task force. Having said that, there would have been a proposal that would have been received by the task force many, many moons ago, at a time when we weren't even at the point of having vaccination. And the gist of that proposal, if I recall correctly, even at the point when we were still in the middle of a 14-day quarantine, etc., was that the pilots wanted the ability to not quarantine, come off a flight, walk all over the place, do whatever they had to do. There was no concept of a bubble even then for them. And of course, that could not have been countenanced by the task force, led primarily by the advice of the medical professionals. As it is right now, things are much improved. As I said, we are gradually easing out of the restrictions to the point where we have, and it has been articulated by so many other speakers before me this morning, in that we now have a 24-hour quarantine period. So by that token, whatever might have been the constraints that pilots, local and foreign, would have been under, would have been greatly eased. And in some cases, it might not even be necessary, because depending on the scheduling of flights, pilots will remain on board while the passengers disembark, the aircraft is sanitized, restocked, reloaded, and then leave the Federation with the next group of passengers on to the next destination. But for the sake of completeness and for accuracy, there is no recent proposal from the local pilots before the COVID-19 task force.
I thank Senator Phipps for that response. We have had a good time here. The session has been quite informative. We must bring all good things to an end. And so I want to now say thank you to our friends of the media who have come out. Some using the technology have sent their questions. We have attempted to do justice to them. We appreciate your fair reporting of all these matters. Again, to the Cabinet colleagues, my appreciation for coming. The value of your being here is well felt and appreciated in the manner in which we organize this press conference. Again, giving the people who have particular subjects the opportunity to respond and to be held accountable by the public, while the Prime Minister, in a sense, oversees and ensure that the Cabinet functions in a way that will deliver the stronger and safer future. Again, thanks very much to all of you who have come for your contributions, even by just being present. Thank you very much. I did omit the Permanent Secretary in Sustainable Development, Mrs. Elvita Simpson-Brown. I want to say thank you to her. To Zara said and all the media, thank you for always doing a wonderful job. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of the week.